it is, something that makes it interesting and vibrant. So that's what this can provide. In terms of aesthetics, you can establish standards for that. You could establish a process where you as the Planning Commission, or you might delegate it to Brian, or you might have the Main Street Committee review it to make sure that the food cart is acceptable to the high standards that Canby has for itself. And since these food carts want to be permanent and they want to attract customers, you can ask them to up their game a bit. They don't have to be junky like in Portland. Let's see. Another point is that our downtown availability of retail space is pretty tight right now. If someone were looking for space, they'd be hard-pressed to find some smaller retail spaces. That's not necessarily true on Highway 99E. And in the industrial area, you can go to Canby Marketplace, and that's about it. But you have people that are working there that might have a half-hour lunch break, and they'd probably like to be able to go somewhere quick and cheap and grab something to eat. So it's serving a clientele that it's providing a price point and a variety to folks in Canby that may have a limited means, and that's a valuable service as well. It's also a good interim use for a vacant piece of property. If it's sitting there, you might as well have some activity on it. The property owner is generating some revenue off of it. It's demonstrating activity, so a potential developer might be more drawn to it than otherwise. As long as there are precautions that there's no hazardous waste or anything that's causing environmental damage, I don't see a downside necessarily. Let's see, what else? In terms of the approval process, you could protect yourself also by providing a 6-month or a 1-year check-in to make sure that the food cart or the vendor is meeting standards, that there haven't been complaints, that they truly are providing a valuable service, and they're not safe, or that they're safe and insured and all that. And then if they're not up to code, up to standards, then they lose their permit. So there are safeguards that you can put into place in this process to make it more acceptable, should you choose to do so.
Jamie Stickle, Main Street Manager, and I would just second what Renata said. Obviously, we have really great, if I just think about the downtown, really great bricks and mortar restaurants down here. Backstop Grill is a new one, and they do a great triple cheese zombie or something. It's like a grilled cheese sandwich, but it's fancy and it's got bacon and it's got. And then if you had a food cart that was 50 meters away or out of the way, and they did a food cart as well, or a cheese zombie with bacon and tomatoes and cheese, you have to think there are two different situations that you're at. Are you going to stand outside, eat your food in the middle of the street? Maybe that's what you want that night. But do you want to bring your friends, bring your family, get a beer, watch the game? So I think that by bringing more choices to the downtown, it can bring more people. Some of these businesses do turn into a bricks and mortar, so maybe there's not a space available for them right now, and they, build up a clientele and they think, wow, Canby's where we want to be, and we want to be here forever, and we want to make it so that we can have somebody come in and have a beer, bring your family, watch the game, whatever that might be. It's just a stepping stool. Sometimes you see that with arts and crafts vendors that start at farmers markets, and they, for 5 years they went to the farmers market every Saturday, traveled the circuit, and then finally they said, we can make it, we're going to do this, we can afford to have a storefront. And it attracts attention not just from people, customers coming downtown, but also possibly for property owners. Maybe they get a little attention and someone says, hey, are you interested in selling that building? I've got some ideas. Or even developers that want to come downtown. So I'm all for rules and regulations. I think that, I think Canby's beautiful. I don't want anything to make it less beautiful. But I think that there are ways that we can make these food carts fit a standard so that they're exactly what Canby wants and what Canby needs, and could be a fun addition to the area.
Thank you.
Question, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead. So
Um,
ladies can stay up for 1 second.
Either one of you, do you see particular areas that you could see these carts moving into right now? That are targeted for you guys, saying we could put them here, we could put them there?
There are several vacant lots downtown that might be potential early good starting points. The one would be next to the Canby Cinema. There's a vacant lot there. There's also a vacant lot that's behind, what we call it, the Red Door, the antique store on Fur and Second.
It's like 486 Northwest First. I
Right.
believe.
Yeah, right.
Right, those are the two that come immediately to mind. I did want to add that I would concur with Brian's recommendation to have it start out, if you should choose to do so, on private property only, as opposed to public. I think you get into much more controversy with existing businesses if you open up to public property, and also if you allow them to park on the streets, you're taking away valuable parking, and we certainly hear from businesses about their concerns about that.
Can
Go ahead, Mr. Savory.
I noticed that you used the word, it could start on private property with the idea in your mind that it would go to public property.
Not at all. I would
Well, you said
prefer.
that it would start, what you said was that it could start off on, as these food carts could be on private property, with the implication in my mind that it could eventually, on that slippery slope, move to public property. That's one thing. Second thing was, I want to go back to your triple cheese, bacon, sounds delicious, zombie, 5,000 calorie sandwich. How do you think the backstop would feel? They've just poured tons of money into that location where two other businesses have failed. And so what you're saying is that they've spent all this money on their location, on their bricks and mortar, to make it go. And I was in there last weekend. I couldn't even find a place to stand. So you're saying that if some guy moved 50 feet down with his little cart, produced the same sandwich, that there would be equity in that in some way, shape, or form, that they wouldn't have to pay. They would. What you're asking in this is for a reduced type of permitting fees, that they don't have to have the same kind of investment that these other business owners have gone through, the same pains that they go through to get their business up and running. And so you want to cut these guys some slack financially to compete with somebody that has just spent tens of thousands of dollars to get their business up and running. That goes back to me, which is an issue of fairness, and I don't think that it's. I just find that very objectionable. Finally.
Mr. Savory, keep it to questions for him.
Okay. Finally, why are you not considering separating the non-commercial, non-retail business of the salsa guy and tying it into this? He's not selling to the public. This is all about selling it to the public. Food carts, retail.
This doesn't say food carts, by the way. It's any street vendors. It's any goods or services.
So I'll take a couple of your questions. One is, I apologize for any confusion. I don't ever advocate that this should be on public property. I would support it only being on private property. Secondly, it's a whole different experience, as Jamie mentioned. Stopping by for a quick grab for a burrito for $3 at a food cart is a whole different thing than sitting at a sit-down restaurant. I may have an hour on my lunch break. I may be grabbing something to eat, but that keeps me downtown, wandering by, potentially stopping in at other stores. It's creating that foot traffic that will lead to additional sales. And so if a existing restaurant feels that they're head-on competition with a food cart, shame on them. I mean, a food cart has limited space and limited They can't have the same breadth of product mix. They can't have the same level of customer service necessarily. They can't have the same experience. And so if they're feeling they can't compete against a food cart, then they need to up their business game a little bit.
The other thought on that is, who's to say that, say you're talking Backstop, and somebody's selling a competitive burger down in the parking lot across from Parsons. Here, let's use the same analogy. Across from Parsons in the little U-shaped parking lot. Why couldn't Backstop then have their own food cart selling their cheesy burger in Parsons parking lot?
I've seen that in Portland. Where
if it's really that big, or why, there's nothing saying that it wouldn't actually be the Backstop selling their super cheesy burger down somewhere in one of the vacant lots by Fred Meyer. It very well. So it's not necessarily that somebody else is getting this unfair advantage, even if hypothetically it was an unfair advantage, which I don't disagree with. But it's not somebody else; it's anybody. This is open to anybody.
Well, I would probably say fine, as long as they have to pay all the same fees, all the same regulations that brick and mortar operation has to go through. I could maybe find some wiggle room there, but if the fee structure is different, then then we have again, it goes back to an issue of fairness.
Thank you, ladies, for.
Actually, I have one last question. Sorry. You both had said that you've seen a number, of food trucks become brick and mortar buildings. Just kind of guess what percentage that is.
Gosh, I don't know. I forwarded the article to Brian. It was in the Oregonian fairly recently. Brian, do you recall?
Not a percentage-wise. I think they were merely indicating that there are examples of them being very successful and moving in.
Okay.
But I'm sure overall it's probably pretty low percentage. But,
Right. Yeah. I just didn't know if it was.
But that's
like 1
true
out
of any
100
business
or 1 out of
surviving.
20.
Yeah.
I've actually been to a restaurant that came from a food cart down in I think it was on Second, Southwest Second. So yes, it does happen. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else from the public like to make any comments? Come on up, sir.
Al Tate, 718 Northeast 10th Avenue, longtime Canby resident. I think you've hit on that there's two separate issues here, food carts and a production facility. The food cart, we've had several fast food restaurants fold here recently. And I can't see that if they sell at the same price with lower overhead, why we wouldn't have more brick and mortar failures. And when you go out at the brick and mortar store, there's a garbage can right at the door. And when you leave the food cart, the sidewalk is the repository. Plus you have the health issues, the brick and mortar, everyone has to wash their hands twice, and all that kind of stuff. And I don't see running water at the food cart, in big cities where they have them. I dive into the building and eat. It's just what I think is a little more sanitary, a little less exposure to maybe not feeling very good that evening.
Okay, thank you. Let me pose a hypothetical for everybody, just so we discuss this. The only complaints that I've really heard so far, so I'm going to phrase this in terms of what people have really talked about, is mostly related to food carts. hypothetically, if food for immediately consumable food, like prepared food, was not on the table, would that change your opinion about these? I'm thinking people could use these things for, like you say, arts and craft. Maybe you have art for sale. Maybe you have painting supplies. Maybe you have other stuff that could be readily presented in some sort of a mobile facility. Would that change your mind, John or Sean? I mean, some of the Monday.
Make me think about it a little different. Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that as I was focused on the food cart, the food issue, and so I hadn't really thought of a mobile incense retailer or a mobile bong shop. I hadn't thought of those.
Or what if you get these jerky and you got, what if you had some, one of the bigger nurseries wanted to send down a truck loaded up with, retail nursery products,
Right. Hadn't even thought of that.
I think it's a good idea to have something in plan like we have talking here. And the circumstances with the fellow here, I think it's a whole different ballgame too. When, in which they're trying to use this for help him. I think it's a whole different situation. And I like the idea that if Cufford's is willing to do it, then they're responsible for all the things that has to be in line to meet codes and everything else. And I like that idea. If Cufford's would do it, I think there's nothing wrong with that, if they're willing to do it. And they might in some time allow somebody to bring in a cart or something for flowers or special kids from high school want to do a little program or something like that. So I think, we should allow some of this stuff. And I think if we come up with some kind of standards and everybody has to meet, that would give it, and would also help them, the planning department, that they can okay it, and we don't have to go through a whole big rigmarole of bringing it before the planning commission and all that, if we have some kind of standards to set forth. So that part of it, I'm in favor of us having some type of standards for this kind of stuff. But under the circumstances, what he's doing, that's a different ballgame, because he's not selling to the public. I mean, he is, but not directly. And what he wants to do, and Cufford's is willing to do it under circumstances, I think it's a great idea.
This is not an official public hearing tonight, so we can't take an official action to pass anything. So my proposal would be that we continue to think about this, have suggestions, unless anybody has a motion today to direct staff to do something else that passes, then my suggestion would be that we entertain a motion to table this for continued input at our next planning commission meeting. I won't make that as an official motion, but that would be my suggestion if enough of you want to go along with that, or if you want to make other motions about this particular matter.
I think that's a good idea. I have one question though. Who's going to be the rust and dent police for this? We talk about no more than 10% rust or something like that. Who's going to go out there with their tape measure and say you're out of compliance, you've got to paint this? I mean, it's great to have the standard, but how are we going to enforce it?
That's why the idea, if Cuthbert's is willing to do this, then their responsibility, and if anything goes wrong, it's their thing.
I agree with your sentiment on that the property owner would be mostly the one responsible. But then again, if you have a vacant lot, then you've got to worry about everybody else more so. Right. If it's next to an established business, then yeah, they're going to self-police a little bit. But for instance, what's his name? It's been in here on that lot on 99, right on the corner. Ryan. If his lot, if he wanted to let somebody go in there and do something, there's no existing business. He's got neighbors on both sides, and if it was ugly, so you'd have concern there.
What, don't we have codes that govern that, things that, within our city codes that they have to meet? Which would be the same thing, and the property owner then would be still being responsible to meet those codes that's set up.
I see what Chuck's saying, it's gonna fall under the same purview as their building.
Mm-hmm.
It's an extension of their building by them giving right for that to be on their property.
Only if you do it Angie's, I'm not saying Angie's way, but the other way that Angie had also suggested, maybe with doing it as an accessory use. Otherwise, it might not even fall under the tests for all the other code requirements. That would be the,
I see what Chuck's saying, I think.
And
that's
with
the better
these,
way to
with
go.
measuring things like setbacks, especially, that was another question I had when, I think for Brian too, is would you make these things meet setbacks? Most of them want to be right up to the street.
I mean, that's the typical, I mean,
Yeah.
that's why they call them street vendors in literature nationwide, because they want to be right up front at the street where the sidewalk is, where people can walk in, or on the edge of a parking lot where they can drive in, but they have to be visible from the passing traffic because they aren't going to have the pole sign or anything else to advertise. And so they don't meet our setbacks. And so you're inventing a process that is circumventing the normal building permit city code requirements. That's why this is out of the box, so to speak, because we're inventing a process that allows them to circumvent all the normal standards to get a building permit, to meet the setbacks, to have utilities that potentially are not buried and installed permanently but are running on the ground, or a electric line that strings up to a pole, which you would not allow anyone else to do.
but in a way, it's also freeing up property for more uses. It's giving more
It
flexibility
is.
for
It's
property
doing exactly
rights
what
to use.
Renata had indicated. And on property that's not being used now in any way, it's giving that opportunity. And so that's why I said this is all a philosophical thing, because communities across the nation have chosen, especially since 2008 with the recession, to figure out a way to facilitate the entrepreneur and people to find a means of jobs without having the ability to have capital, because this is a way to start a business very inexpensively and provide a product that obviously in many locations and places people want. And it's those that provide a product that is unique or provides the variety that are most successful and often move on to greater successes. And so, this seemed like a topic for us to at least discuss, because we have a nearby city that is known throughout the nation for accommodating these. But there are drawbacks, which we heard, that if we aren't careful, and don't have a design review process, and one of the other problems with the design review process is if you formalize it too much, then again, it causes the need for a higher permit fee, or we're subsidizing these, and the planning department's going deeper in a hole in the staff time that we allot to each one of these if we don't charge them the proper permit fee. As you know, our conditional use permits and other things that come before you are over $1,000. And if you do that, and so another thing that you raised is, and I think rightfully so, and I've seen it in several articles, well, as long as they meet the other permit requirements that every brick and mortar has to do, should we apply SDCs? That is exactly what Gresham is discussing right now. And I did a little calculation. I said if the only SDCs that would be applicable, in my mind, the way our methodologies are parks and transportation. The parks SDC would, for a food vendor cart, if it was maybe as big as 150 square feet in size, 10 by 15, would probably be about $175. But the transportation SDC, at a very minimal, the best category that I could possibly give it would be $1,729, because it is based upon, well, it could be different depending on the kind of use but most of them would probably be about the same. But it could range from that $1,700 all the way up to potentially $29,000 for a food cart because of its size, and so that becomes an issue, because potentially we'd have to waive SDCs, or I don't think we're going to get a food cart for even $1,700 worth of SDC. And so they're trying to decide, and the council right now in Gresham is leaning towards requiring payment of SDCs.
That'll basically push all the food carts back into Portland out of Gresham. 'Cause it sounds to me like it's cost prohibitive.
Right.
Well, like I said before, in my opinion, I don't think we have a work product right now that we are prepared to like vote on or ask staff to write up into an official public hearing format and put notice out on it. So my thoughts are we've got a lot of bullet points and what people liked, didn't like. Some of them I think could be dealt with. For instance, the objection of pods was mentioned. You could certainly add in here some language on a maximum amounts per lot. And some of these things could be molded and mended to some degree. So again, my thoughts are that we do some homework on these, on the line items that have been brought up and the concerns that have been brought up, see if there could be any workable version of this thing that could pass if we had an actual public meeting and a vote on it, and then move for that, table it to the next meeting, and then maybe we have something that we vote on as a concept, then to have an official public meeting on that concept, if it were to pass in some form or fashion. Everybody okay with that?
Do we, one thing, do we address this gentleman's production issue separately?
Well, we don't
Unless
have
we roll it
the
in.
capacity to, unless we actually were to amend an ordinance and then pass a proposed amendment to the ordinance that goes up to city council for them to ratify and approve. So otherwise, he doesn't have a pending application that we could approve with a decision right now or anything like that. So that's not something that we have the capacity to deal with. One, tonight, because this wasn't an official public hearing, was it? No. And so we couldn't even do it even if we passed this thing tonight. We couldn't pass this thing tonight as is. But that would, in effect, push it off another month, because we wouldn't be able to pass it at our next meeting either, because it's not going to be an official public hearing on any language. So it would delay another month, that's for sure. Any potential remedy for him would be delayed another month. But.
Is he operating right now?
No.
You're not?
Definitely have a regular job right now to waiting for this to happen, so.
Okay. So that tells me too that we need to kind of light a fire under it a little bit here. He's been waiting on us.
Yeah.
And
Again, I think the question that Commissioner Surlett was asking is the same one staff was asking, is that I'm not sure the food vendor or street vendor process is necessarily the right one for addressing his concern.
Right.
And so I think he was asking you, should we exclude him from this discussion? And we've given you two other alternatives. We can't think of any others right now. The accessory use or a home-based business. And we've already tentatively told him to go attempt the whole home-based business if he wishes to do that. Staff has quite a bit of experience. We can't absolutely guarantee that it won't be a problem, but we think he can operate within those guidelines. And, that's what we'll tell neighbors if they complain, that we believe that he's operating within the home-based business guidelines.
Brian, under that theory, if he started up as this, maybe I should ask you this question. Under that theory, if you started up as a home-based business and this came to a point where you would be approved to work your deal with Cutsworths and move your business there, would that be something you would do
Oh, yeah.
instead of keeping it at home?
Oh, yes. Definitely.
Okay. And that to me makes a difference too.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it would be, let's get him going and get him doing what he wants to do here. And that way, as we figure this out and get this taken care of,
Right.
you'd be able to move that business then.
So I'm leaning towards exploring further Angie's idea of if we can do this without a code amendment or whether we need a different code amendment that addresses accessory uses in the code.
Or you could have the accessory uses that then gets inserted into particular zones because, like, for instance, Mr. Cocker didn't want it to be in residential. You could have this as one type of accessory use that could be gone through without a permit, streamlined in certain zones.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
something like an accessory use of
Of
a
mobile vendor.
a display stand, including some of this language of a tent, cart, truck, etc., and listing that as an accessory use in each, or whatever zones the planning commission would think would be appropriate.
Is there anything that Cuthbert's can do to say that we would like to do this and go through that way?
Or we already know that he's made an arrangement with, right? The trouble is we don't have what we believe is a current city code that would allow this. And so that's what we're stumbling around
And we
here
would,
trying to
we would
figure out.
allow if they wanted to build correct me if I'm wrong, a permanent structure, brick and mortar structure on their parking lot or behind their store, then that's what the code currently allows and thinks of as an accessory use, not a mobile type structure.
Can you just make an agreement with them as part of their business without going through all the city stuff? Is there something saying that he can't do that, make an agreement with Cuthbert, and Cuthbert say, yeah, we accept it, and
Yeah,
and
basically-
it doesn't meet
Basically zoning ordinances
zoning
for the
ordinance?
community
That's the
prohibit it.
problem, huh?
That's what they do is they supersede private agreements.
I think it's something we can explore,
So I think,
definitely.
we're hearing a general direction to continue to see if we can identify a way to accommodate his business in a commercial district where he's already kind of arranged it. And so we can go back. I don't think this is going to be the avenue from the discussion I've heard tonight to fix his concerns. I think maybe we can go the route we've just discussed and try to figure out another route for that.
Well, could Cuthbert's come and make a, I don't know what you would call it, a application or something to proceed to allow him to do this?
The answer is, depending on exactly which way they tried to do it under the code, and if it was either perfectly clear that they could do it, which is probably not the case, whether there was a gray area, and that, or whether it was prohibited, and if somebody wanted to complain. I mean, that's how the process works. It's they have to come in and apply.
I think hopefully we'll be able to think of something, because now we're splitting these things apart. We're focusing on his need only.
Right.
And then if we want to continue along this pathway, hey, this is a separate issue, and that may help the gears work a little better, because we were trying to think of him originally until a couple of weeks ago when we knew he wasn't serving customers as part of this group, and he's not. And so maybe if we split him apart, we can give that another try, see if we can come up with something.
Would you be selling your product through Cutsworth
Yes.
That's just the start, or you would try to expand your business beyond that, or is it only gonna be retailed at Cutsworth?
Oh, no, right now, I can't even get into a farmer's market right now because I don't have a state certified kitchen. I tried the mobile kitchens that they have like in Portland and stuff, but they don't have the smokers that I need. And I tried using a co-packer. A co-packer doesn't want it because they don't want the smoke flavor in the facility. And so this mobile unit gives me my state certified kitchen, which will allow me to get into the farmers markets, into the other stores. Ebner said that he would actually sell it in his facility. You know, it was just open all kinds of doors for me.
Okay, so that's where we are. It is an item of new business, so we do need to act upon it in some form or fashion. Do I hear anything from, is there a motion? I asked for a motion to table. Is there something else, or would somebody make a motion to table it for next month?
Well, one final thing. I like the direction of separating this gentleman, helping solve his problem, because it really, is a separate issue in my mind, as it appears to be in yours now. So I would like to, Mr. Chair, move that we table the issue of the street mobile vendor permit draft, street mobile vendor permit ordinance, and till at least our next meeting.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of tabling the review and discussion of the draft street or mobile vendor ordinance, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, signify by saying nay. Ayes have it. That item of business is tabled for next month. We have no other items of new business. We have no final decisions. We already approved the minutes. Other items of interest, staff reports.
Well, we've mentioned right on the agenda there that we do have a item for your next Planning Commission meeting on October 28th, a minor land partition. And then we could place, if you want, this food vendor item at the same place without a public hearing again for further discussion. If you want to think about it between now and then, staff won't have time by the next meeting to do any, because the packet has to go out at the end of this week. So I don't see us getting anything really done too much difference unless you want us to try a draft without public property involved, just to see how that works versus this one that's
It
a
would
little
just
more
be
open.
removing a paragraph.
Right, that'd be about it. Because we did seem to hear that direction from you.
I'm thinking we need to have a non-public hearing on that agenda items, and where we insert particular line items and see if there's consensus on particular line items, see how that process evolves, and then when we're done with that, see if there's enough people to vote it forward onto council.
And would you like to do that at the next meeting? 'Cause
I think we will do that in basically 2 iterations, if you follow what I'm thinking, that we make some modifications to the draft. And once we move forward to draft, we'll give that to you for a public hearing, and you can
Okay.
notice that as a public hearing.
Yeah, okay. Did want to poll you and think ahead. There's a regularly scheduled meeting on December 23rd of the Planning Commission, which is the Monday before Christmas holiday. Guess it's the holiday, or is it 2 days before? It'd be two.
Christmas
2
Eve.
days.
What's a dent in
Christmas
that
Eve.
last-minute husband type shopping?
So my question is, staff would encourage you to consider canceling that meeting so that we don't try to schedule something on that date in anticipation that we might have trouble getting enough people here. And thought we'd ask you what your thoughts are.
cancel or reschedule?
Well, my thoughts are generally that if the public's got business, we've got a duty to be here and do our job. But that's just me. I'm a glutton for punishment. Oh, I don't know what anybody else has thoughts on that. I mean, I would prefer that we don't have it. Obviously, you guys aren't going to want to be here either, so none of us probably want to be here that night.
Anybody have plans to be out of town already or anything?
I don't think so. Why don't we tentatively try to not plan anything, or officially try to not plan anything there? If there's something urgent that needs to come up on a permit deadline or something, then we have to shove it in there and figure out how to do it.
Yep, that works fine. Laney, is there anything else that we wanted to mention?
The handbook.
That's right. I know there's something. In your notebook, Laney has already included a planning commissioner handbook that she placed in the back that's really a conglomeration of some of the things that were already in here. But she's done it in a nice, more organized fashion that includes a table of contents. And I think it'll be a lot more helpful in trying to find answers to specific questions or something by the organization that she's done that way. So I was
great.
really
Yeah.
appreciative. And I think having a new planning commissioner prompted us to take a look at that and make it a little more user-friendly with Commissioner Surlett coming on board. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of that, and I want to congratulate Laney for working on that.
Thank you, Lynn. Brandon, let me rewind you for 1 second. Are any of the three of you going to be gone that week immediately prior, full on vacation before
It
that?
does appear that I will be gone.
So that's different. All right. Then let's.
But what you said was exactly the case, is that if we know in advance that we can try to steer things, oftentimes it's easier to end up without any item on the agenda.
Yeah, if you three aren't here, it would be like me steering a boat with no rudder. So let's try. I'm sure the video production guy is quite competent, but I don't know if he's going to be out here if you three aren't here. So yeah, that would
Okay.
probably not be a good idea to have that meeting if you're all on vacation. Any other staff?
I think that's all I got.
Okay, any planning commissioner items of interest, thoughts, things we want to put on future agendas, things?
Just one last thought. Welcome aboard. Good luck.
Okay. Not hearing any other items of business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn our meeting.
I'm sure Mr. Cocker will have a nice donation for the city of Canby. Okay, there's been a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I would second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Meeting is adjourned.